I was halfway through the emergency room doors when security shoved an arm across my chest. "Ma'am, stop right there. My son is bleeding," I screamed. Roy was limp in my arms, his blood soaking through the towel I'd wrapped around his stomach in the car. His face looked grey under the hospital lights. Every few seconds his fingers twitched against my jacket like he was trying to hold on. "Mom," he whispered weakly. "I know, baby, I know, stay with me." The automatic doors opened behind the guard as another patient was rushed inside on a stretcher. Doctors moved fast for him. Then the doors shut again in my face. I tried to push forward anyway. "Please," I shouted. "He collapsed at home, somebody help him." Inside the lobby, nurses stood behind computers staring at me instead of moving. One of them glanced toward the front desk like she needed permission first. The receptionist finally looked up. "Insurance card." For a second, I honestly thought I heard her wrong. "My son is dying. We require a deposit before emergency intake if there's no active coverage." Roy cried out softly against my shoulder, and panic exploded inside me. I dropped to my knees right there on the hospital floor. "Please," I begged, "please just get a doctor." That was when a man in a grey suit walked across the lobby toward us. Calm, clean, completely unbothered. Everyone around him straightened immediately. "Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell for updates." "Mr. Hale," the receptionist said nervously, "no payment authorization." He looked down at me like I was interrupting his evening. I tightened my grip on Roy. "Sir, he needs help now." The man barely blinked. "Then you should have brought him somewhere you could afford." The whole lobby went dead quiet. Even the security guard looked uncomfortable after that. I stared at him in shock, while Roy's blood dripped onto the tile beneath me. And the worst part, nobody argued with him. One nurse looked away immediately. Another kept typing without speaking. A doctor appeared briefly near the hallway entrance, saw Roy in my arms, then disappeared the second Martin Hale glanced his way. That's when something cold settled into my stomach. This wasn't chaos. This was procedure. Roy's breathing suddenly hitched hard against my chest. "Mom." My panic snapped into something sharper. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone and made one call. The line picked up immediately. "Dad," I said quietly, staring directly at Martin Hale. "They're doing it again." For the first time all night, his expression cracked. The color drained from his face, so fast that even one of the nurses noticed. I heard her whisper behind the desk. "Why did he just go pale?" Martin recovered fast. "Remove her from the entrance," he ordered. The security guard hesitated. "Sir, the child." I said, "Move them." The second the guard stepped toward me, I backed away and tightened my arms around Roy. "Don't touch her, sir." Roy let out a weak groan against my shoulder. The towel pressed to his stomach was almost completely red now. I could feel his body getting colder through his clothes, and every second standing there felt like watching sand disappear through my hands. People in the waiting room had stopped pretending not to watch. A woman near the vending machine stood up. Are they seriously refusing to help that little boy? Martin ignored her completely. I looked straight at him. "You're going to let him die over money?" His jaw tightened slightly. "Lower your voice." That answer told me everything. My chest burned with a mix of fear and rage so intense it almost drowned out the panic. Because I'd heard this tone before. Years ago, my mother had begged doctors the same way I was begging now. I was 14 when she collapsed at work and got left sitting in a hallway because paperwork hadn't cleared yet. By the time they finally treated her, the damage was already permanent. I still remembered my father screaming in that hospital corridor while administrators talked about protocol. Roy suddenly coughed hard into my shoulder. Blood spotted my sleeve. "Baby, stay awake for me," I whispered. A young nurse slipped quietly beside me while Martin argued with someone at the desk. Without looking directly at me, she handed me fresh gauze. Her voice was barely audible. "You're not the first family this happened to." I looked up sharply. What does that mean? Fear flashed across her face instantly. She stepped back like she regretted speaking at all. Across the lobby, I noticed intake forms sitting beside the receptionist keyboard. One page had a large red stamp across it. Non-emergency, pending financial clearance. Roy had never even seen a doctor. Nobody had examined him. Yet somehow they'd already classified him. My stomach turned. Near the hallway entrance, Martin leaned toward two staff members and spoke under his breath. Compliance is monitoring tonight. Nobody says anything unnecessary. Compliance. Not medical staff. Not trauma response. Compliance. Then sirens sounded outside. Relief hit me so hard I nearly cried. Finally. Maury paramedics. Maury help. But when the front doors opened, it wasn't a trauma team coming in. Two men and a woman in business clothes walked through the lobby carrying folders and laptops. Hospital legal staff. Martin moved toward them immediately. No phones out, he snapped at employees nearby. No recordings, no statements to anyone. That was the moment the fear inside me changed shape completely. They weren't trying to save my son. They were trying to protect themselves. I looked down at Roy, trembling weakly in my arms, while lawyers arrived before a doctor. And one question kept pounding through my head. By the time Martin finished talking to the legal team, half the waiting room already had phones out. He noticed too late. A teenager sitting near the entrance muttered, "This is insane," while recording everything. Another woman started live-streaming directly toward me and Roy. "Look at this," she said into her phone. "This hospital is refusing a bleeding kid." Martin snapped instantly. "Security, shut those recordings down now." But the room had already turned against him. A man near the reception desk stood up. "You people made her wait this whole time." "They said she needed a deposit first," someone answered. The entire lobby erupted. One nurse tried calming people down while another argued with security. Patients started demanding names. Someone shouted that they were calling the news. Roy stirred weakly against me. "Mom cold." I pressed the fresh gauze harder against him. "Stay with me, baby, please stay awake." Then a voice cut across the chaos. "I know him." Everyone turned. An older woman near the chairs pointed directly at Martin. "That man denied my husband treatment 6 months ago." The room went silent again. Martin's face hardened. "Ma'am, this is inappropriate." "He died 3 days later," she shouted over him. "And they told us there were no beds available until we paid up front." The tension exploded all over again. People started yelling questions from every direction. "How many times has this happened? Is this even legal? You let people die." For the first time that night, Martin looked overwhelmed. Even some employees looked shaken now. 2 nurses near triage started arguing quietly with each other, while the livestream viewers climbed higher and higher. Then my phone rang. The callback. I answered immediately without taking my eyes off Martin. "Dad." The lobby noise faded around me as I listened. Then I said the words that finally cracked him. "Yes, I still have the documents Mom kept." Martin froze. Not nervous. Terrified. He stepped toward me fast. "Who exactly are you talking to?" I ignored him. My father's voice stayed calm on the other end. "Are they refusing treatment?" "They were," I answered loudly enough for Martin to hear. His confidence vanished instantly. He spun toward the staff. "Get a trauma room ready now, move the child immediately." The entire lobby reacted at once. A man near the chairs shouted, "Oh, now they care." "That's convenient," another woman yelled. I stared directly at Martin as nurses suddenly rushed forward with a wheelchair. "No," I said. The staff stopped. Martin blinked at me. "What? You don't get to pretend this didn't happen. Your son needs treatment." He needed treatment 30 minutes ago. The livestream cameras stayed pointed directly at us, while people in the lobby started chanting. Call the police. Call the media. Martin looked around wildly as the entire situation slipped out of his control. Then suddenly, a deafening alarm blasted through the hospital. Red emergency lights flashed overhead. People screamed and jumped from their seats. Martin had pulled the fire alarm. The fire alarm sent the entire hospital into chaos. Patients poured into the hallways. Nurses shouted evacuation orders over the flashing red lights. Security started forcing people toward the exits while the live streams kept rolling. Rain hammered the parking lot outside as everyone flooded out of the building. I stayed planted near the entrance with Roy in my arms. "I'm not moving," I yelled, "not until somebody helps my son." That was when a real EMT team finally spotted us. One paramedic's expression changed instantly the second he saw the blood. "How long has he been untreated?" Nobody answered. The paramedic looked around in disbelief. "Are you kidding me right now? This kid should already be inside." Suddenly, the staff started contradicting each other. "We were preparing a rooms." "That's not what happened." "Administration delayed intake." "No, billing did." The story was cracking apart in real time. As the confusion exploded around us, the young nurse from earlier slipped beside me again. Her hands were shaking. "You didn't get this from me." She shoved folded papers into my jacket pocket and disappeared into the crowd before I could stop her. I opened them immediately. Patient intake logs. Rows of names. Timestamps. Status updates. And the same phrase repeated over and over. Stable pending financial review. My pulse spiked. Some of those timestamps didn't make sense. Several patients had been marked stable before examination times even started. The records were altered, just like my mother once claimed. Around us, the story was spreading fast now. Reporters began arriving outside the hospital entrance with cameras and microphones. Protesters gathered near the sidewalk after clips from the livestream exploded online. Then another bomb hit. Someone leaked the hospital's entrance security footage. A reporter standing beside a news van suddenly shouted, "We have the video." Crowds pushed closer around the screens. There it was. Martin clearly blocking staff from letting me through the ER doors while Roy bled in my arms. No edits. No excuses. Just proof. Martin immediately tried damage control. "She manipulated the situation," he snapped at reporters. "The child was never denied treatment." "That's a lie," someone shouted from the crowd. Police cruisers pulled into the lot moments later. Officers walked directly toward the entrance requesting hospital records, while executives inside started panicking visibly through the glass windows. Then I saw my father stepping through the rain toward me. He carried a thick folder under one arm. When he reached me, his face looked older than I remembered. "You were right to call," he said quietly. He handed me the folder. Inside were years of documents. Internal complaints. Settlement agreements. Emails discussing financial filtration targets tied to a hospital merger. My mother had been collecting evidence long before she died. And now I understood why Martin panicked when I made that call. This scandal was never about one cruel administrator. It was the whole system. Martin saw the folder in my hands and immediately turned toward the parking lot. He was trying to leave. But before he could reach his car, black SUVs pulled into the hospital driveway. Men and women in dark jackets stepped out carrying federal credentials. The entire crowd fell silent as they walked straight past Martin and through the hospital doors. Nobody stopped the federal investigators as they entered the hospital. Not security. Not administration. Not even Martin. He just stood there in the rain watching them disappear through the ER entrance while reporters circled him like sharks. One investigator paused long enough to speak to the police officers outside. "Lockdown records access immediately. Nobody leaves with files or devices." That was the moment I realized this had already gone far beyond my son. Roy was finally rushed inside by a trauma team that didn't ask me for a single form or dollar first. Doctors moved fast now, faster than I'd seen anyone move all night. I sat outside the operating room soaked in blood and rainwater, while nurses hurried past me carrying supplies. My father sat beside me silently for a long time before speaking. "Your mother found out what they were doing years ago," he said quietly. I looked at him. She thought it was isolated at first. A few delayed admissions, insurance manipulation, then she started noticing patterns. He opened the folder again. Inside were copied emails between executives discussing emergency room, loss reduction strategies. Certain patients were being flagged before treatment based on income risk, insurance gaps, and likelihood of delayed payment. They never wrote "deny treatment." Instead, they used coded language. Pending stabilization review. Administrative hold. Financial clearance protocol. All phrases designed to delay care long enough to reduce expensive emergency admissions, while technically avoiding direct refusal on paper. And the timing wasn't random. The hospital had been preparing for a massive private investment merger worth millions. Executives wanted cleaner financial reports before the deal closed. Martin Hale enforced those policies personally because his promotion and stock payout depended on it. My mother uncovered enough evidence to become dangerous to them. Then she collapsed during a staffing shortage created by hospital cost-cutting measures. Her own treatment was delayed. Just long enough. She knew they'd bury it if we went public too early, my father said. That's why I kept everything. I stared down the empty hallway toward the operating room doors. And tonight gave us proof, I whispered. Because this time the whole world saw it happen live. Hours later, a surgeon finally walked toward me. "He's stable." My legs nearly gave out. When they let me into Roy's recovery room, he looked so small buried beneath the blankets and wires. Machines beeped softly beside him while bruises darkened under the hospital lights. I sat beside him and grabbed his hand carefully. A few minutes later, his eyes opened halfway. "Mom." My throat tightened instantly. "I'm here, baby. You stayed." I broke completely after that. I leaned forward against the side of his bed, crying into his blanket while he squeezed my fingers weakly. The young nurse from earlier appeared quietly at the doorway later that morning. She looked exhausted. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "This has been happening longer than people know." I nodded slowly. "You helped us." "No," she said, glancing down the hallway toward the investigators. "You stopped it." Outside, the fallout exploded nationwide over the next few days. Families came forward with stories matching ours. News stations replayed Martin's words over and over. "Then you should have brought him somewhere you could afford." Hospital employees resigned publicly. Protesters filled the streets outside the building for weeks. The private merger collapsed almost immediately once federal investigators seized financial records and internal communications. Then came the arrests. Several executives were charged with fraud, obstruction, and falsifying patient documentation. Martin Hale was terminated publicly before investigators escorted him from the building in handcuffs. The same hospital lobby where I begged for my son's life became the center of press conferences announcing federal reforms and emergency care investigations. For the first time in my life, people like us weren't being ignored. Months later, Roy fully recovered. The settlement money from the lawsuits helped me start a patient advocacy foundation focused on emergency care violations and treatment discrimination. And at the hospital entrance where security once blocked us from entering, a memorial plaque was installed honoring patients harmed by delayed treatment policies. The doors that once closed on my son became the evidence that destroyed everyone behind them.